Yo guys, what's up? It's Julian. Today I had a little bit of a different type of video idea. I realized that you guys have only ever seen me from behind my desk on this channel. So I figured today, let's go on a little journey and find some sounds. So, here we are. We are on location, on bike, in the forest. And yeah, I figured the best way to really get some organic sounds is to use some organic sounds. So, we're gonna record some. Alright, so, what's up guys? I'm back in the studio. And I'm going to show you what I made with the samples you just heard me recording. So here it is. So yeah, I'm going to be showing you how I put this together. If you want to get the project file and samples from this video, you can pick that up in the description. I'm going to be including all the cool Foley, I still never know how to say it. But I'm going to be including all those cool sounds that you just saw me recording. Here's the thing, so you can see there's a little folder with a bunch of stuff in here. It's in the description, and yeah, let's dive in. So the first sound that I have here is this little ARP thing that I made with analog. It sounds like this. And so this is just kind of like an extra sort of melodic layer. I will turn off the reverb and show you what's going on. So this is the original kind of sound. So I basically took this cool kind of simple sort of soft sounding ARP and I just added a bunch of reverb and echo to it. I'll talk about that in a moment. But yeah, this is a pretty popular technique in Jon Hopkins music. He's really good at making these kind of really obscured type of sounds. They're still really melodic and help to tell the story, so to speak, of the track, but aren't too obvious. It's still got an element of obscurity to it. So, like I said, the way that I made this was basically, I just had this ARP going. It looks like this, so it's just a simple ARP in the key of the track. And then what I did for the sound was I used a sine wave in Ableton's analog, so yeah, you can see it's just a sine wave. And then I set the amplitude envelope like this, so it's kind of like a simple pluck. And then that's going into this vibrato, which is just giving it a bit of kind of detune and warble. Another thing about Jon Hopkins' music is he uses a lot of analog synths and analog gear and just stuff like that tends to have, some variation to it. It can mess with the pitch a little bit. Sometimes it's not always in key perfectly, it's a little bit up and down. So that was the point of this vibrato, just gives it some of that kind of analog style warble. So then after that, I have a chorus. You can see it's got a pretty slow rate, but the dry wet is kind of up there, and the amount is definitely up. So this is just giving it a little bit more stereo width. And then I have this echo here, so this is doing part of that kind of, like I said, obscuring it with reverb and echo. Here it is without any reverb. So you can hear that's what the echo is doing. It's just giving it some quick kind of repeats. And then yeah, I just have this reverb here. Pretty straightforward on that one. Again, it's just sort of washing the sound out a bit. And then I have a side chain, or a compressor side chain to the kick, and then this EQ8 cutting out the low end. So this is, like I said, this is a pretty popular technique in Jon Hopkins' music. He does this a lot. He'll have something like this, an ARP that's just going on and on, but then some reverb or something comes in that obscures it and just makes it this big wash of sound. So that's what I was going for there. And then the next sound I'm going to show you is this one, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty simple kind of drone thing. Basically, I just made it with operator. It's playing this F. So yeah, it just kind of plays one note the whole time through. And then what we have here is an operator. I have a sine wave, and then a sine wave where I added a little harmonic. I'll talk about that in a sec. And then another sine wave. And then these are just doing the standard default FM algorithm. So on the second oscillator, you can see I added one little harmonic in there. If you don't know, with Ableton's operator, you can do this if you just have a sine wave, like this one, you just go on here, start drawing these in, and you can add harmonics. And I did this to just sort of add a little bit of variation to the sound. Like I didn't want it to be just sine waves. I wanted it to sound a little bit different. So that's that. And then the only other thing I did an operator for this sound was I added a little bit of pitch warble with this LFO. You can see I have the amount pretty low, and yeah, it's just on the pitch. And that's what's making it kind of fluctuate. The thing with this is not doing too much, because if I start turning it up, then it's a little bit too much. So yeah, just keeping it pretty low. After that, I have the saturator, which as you can see is really shaping the sound. So what I did was I used a bunch of drive, and then I used the wave shaper to just kind of make it a little bit more interesting. I like using saturators to do this because similar to FM synthesis, it's so nuanced and like subtle the way you move things around that you can really come up with some interesting timbres that you wouldn't get just like playing with saw waves and square waves. So then after that, I have this auto pan, which is actually not doing any auto panning. All it's doing is I have the phase set on 0, and it's just doing a bit of sort of volume modulation. You can hear that's what's doing that like kind of like rhythm to it. So yeah, so that's something pretty important. A lot of times on these like droning kind of sounds, and you'll see even like with some of the other sounds in here, Jon Hopkins does this a ton. Like he'll take just a long held out note like this, and then add like some volume modulation, which helps make it more kind of like fluctuate and just keeps it interesting. So that's the purpose of that. Then just have a bit of reverb, and then have it sidechained to the kick. So then the next sound that we have here is this one, which I made with granulator. It sounds like this. So the way that I made this sound was I actually started with this in operator. So it's just like this simple kind of pluck with a bit of echo and a bit of reverb. And what I did was, I'll actually do it again here real quick. Basically, I just duplicated that, and then I hit freeze track, and then I flattened it. And you can see we just get an audio file of it. So I took that, and then I put that into the granulator, and that came up with this. So then, if you don't know what granular synthesis is, this granulator is a very popular one for Ableton's Max for Live. It's free. I'm going to link it in the description. But yeah, what granular synthesis does is essentially, it's like a sampler, but it plays back different parts of the sound. So if I hit play, you see that little yellow line just kind of jumping around the audio file? That's what it's doing. This yellow bar here is sort of like, this is set with this grain knob, and that's just sort of like, you know, how long of a space you're going to take. And then this spray is what sends it kind of like around the sample and what makes it move around. So that was the purpose of that. This is a really cool technique. This is also something that Jon Hopkins does a lot, I think. I know he uses a lot of granular synthesis in his music, and for good reason, because you can see it really is a good way to come up with these cool kind of like textured sounds. So yeah, then on that, all I have is just a compressor sidechain to the kick. Pretty simple. And yeah, so then the next thing that we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. So this is kind of where the whole like evolving thing comes in, because you can hear there's a lot of movement in this bass. And so that is coming from this first layer, which is sort of like the mid bass layer. It sounds like this. And yeah, so all this is it's just a saw wave and operator, no other oscillators, so no FM or anything like that. And then that's going into this notch filter, which I played around with the envelope here, but it's not doing anything. It's just staying in one place. And then after that, we have the saturator. So the saturator is kind of where most of the sound is happening. You can see I have the drive up pretty high, and I have the color mode set to the wave shaper. And then what I'm doing with that is I'm automating this curve and this depth. So you can see they both move pretty subtly, to be honest with you. Like the curve just kind of goes up and then goes down. And the same thing with the depth. It's like not too much intricate automation. But this is the key here. Like this is the key to those like slow morphing kind of Jon Hopkins style bass lines. Is to take, you know, a few parameters like this that really, really shape the sound in a strong way, and then just kind of slowly modulate them. Another good way you could do this is if you have any kind of MIDI controller, like an Ableton Push or something like that, you can just do it with your hand with the knob on there and kind of like, yeah, just record automation that way. But I wrote it in here. And yeah, so then after that saturator, I just have an EQ8 cutting out some mid-range stuff that was not really too pleasant. And then I have this utility here, which I automated to go down actually in the middle. And the reason for that is just because I found toward the middle there with the automation, it got a little bit louder. So I just have this to compensate for that. So then under that, I just have this other operator layer, which sounds like this. So this is just the sub. Basically, I have a sine wave here, and I guess, yeah, I used the sine shaper on the filter here to kind of like just give it a bit more grit and make it a little bit less just like a sine wave and give it some more harmonic content. And then after that, I added a saturator just to give it, again, beef it up like a little bit more. So then on the group here, I have a few things. For one, I had the saturator, which you can see is pretty heavy. That's what's really like gluing these two sounds together if I turn it off. So yeah, pretty crucial there. And then after that, I have this auto pan. So this is where I was saying that like that auto pan technique isn't just to be used on like drones or leads or anything like that. I also use it on the bass here because if you listen without it, these are just long notes. Like these are just playing whole notes, or actually like longer than whole notes because it's 2 bars. But yeah, these are just playing like these long held out notes. So to kind of give it some fluctuation and like, you know, some interest, I added this auto pan, and it's doing the same thing that it was doing on that drone where I have the phase all the way down and it's just kind of automating or modulating the volume. And yeah, it gives it like some cool rhythm. This is definitely a very underrated technique. I recommend trying. And then after that, I just have it sidechained to the kick. Pretty straightforward there. Now, before I move forward, I do want to show you really quick. You can see these 2 MIDI files are colored differently, and there's actually not really that much difference to them. They're still playing the same notes. The only difference is you can see that the sub here, actually that first note and the last note too, are up an octave. So those are an octave higher than the main bass. And that's just because, well, for one, like the sub, those notes were a little bit too low. Like you can hear that's just kind of like doom. Like it's not really a bass sound. Whereas this, obviously, you know, has a little bit more of a solid kind of pitch to it. But then the other thing here is this kind of helps make the bass a little bit more complex. This is something that I actually hear Jon Hopkins doing quite a bit in his tracks as well. If you do this, like separate your basses and then have them play the same notes in different octaves, you get some really, really weird sounds because it kind of like tricks your brain when you're hearing the bass line. You think you're hearing one thing when you hear that first note, but then the main bass goes up in pitch and the sub goes down in pitch, and it kind of like throws you off. You can hear. So definitely a cool and underrated technique I recommend trying. So then the next layer that I have here is this other granulator, which sounds like this. And so on this one, I just have this scraping leaf sound. I'll show you in the original thing. Yeah, so it's just one of those recordings of me scraping some leaves together. I put it in the granulator, did some granular synthesis. And yeah, this just gives it like some nice kind of texture in the background. It's similar to if you just put like this same sound like without being in a granular synth, like just as an audio file. Or perhaps if you know, like just put it in the background, or like any other kind of sound like that. Like it's just a nice way to give it some interesting sound in the background, but then by putting it in the granular synth, we get a little bit more of like a warped kind of sound. Like it's more textured, it's more futuristic sounding, it's just a little bit more interesting. So the next thing that I will show you is actually all the drums together, because that would kind of make a little bit more sense. Here are all of the drums. So what we have here is kind of like a combination between Foley/Foley layers and like percussion, and then just like the main drums. So I'll start out with the main drums. I'll show you like the kick and the hi-hat and this little clap thing. So you can hear I have just like a simple kick here. Really no processing on that. It's just like a clean, simple, nice kick. And then for this little clap sound, I actually used one of the Foley sounds. So I had this like stomping on branches sound, which had a bunch of cool percussive sounds in it like that. So I just took one of those, and you can see I lined up the little hit with the 2 and the 4 there. And yeah, then I just cut out some low end on that, and I added a little bit of echo to give it some texture as well. So pretty straightforward there, but that's a cool way to create like claps and snares that have an interesting texture to them, is to use Foley sounds like this. So then I'll show you the other hi-hats as well. So I just have this main hi-hat that I made with operator. pretty straightforward. It's just some white noise going into a bandpass filter. And yeah, then this other one that I have is just a sample, and it plays on every other upbeat. You can hear it's just adding a little bit of like an accent on those upbeats. And yeah, so then the next thing that I will show you here are sort of like these two other percussive layers, which sound like this. Actually, there's a third one. Sounds like this. So what these are three sort of like percussion sounds. This first one is the one that I made with one of those scraping leaf samples. It sounds like this. I'll turn it up a little bit so you can hear. So essentially, this is, you can probably hear it underneath the effects. It's just like the sound of me scraping some leaves. That, and then I kind of put it in here rhythmically so you can see it's just sort of in the beat there. And yeah, and then on that for effects, I have this EQ8 cutting out some high end. I have a little bit of a bit crush. That's what's giving that kind of like sort of distorted sound. And then I added this auto pan as well, which automates up. So this is a little bit more of a complex thing, to be honest with you. But basically, I just added that to sort of like make the volume like automate at the end there. I wanted it to have that same rhythm that like the rest of the drums have. So yeah, this just kind of comes up and adds that. And then I just have an EQ8 cutting out all the low end because the bit crusher adds a bit of it. And yeah, I just figured I would clean that up. So then the next one we have here is just this little percussive sound that I made with one of those Foley hits in there. So I took this sound and I just put it in a sample. You can see I started it a little bit late. But yeah, it's just in there sort of rhythmically. And then the last thing we have here is just this little percussion, which sounds like this. So these just kind of play off of the hi-hats. And yeah, these are just some nice percussion sounds. I think they were just some that I had on my hard drive. These aren't made with any Foley sounds or anything. But they're just some nice, kind of like organic, raw percussion like that. So that's pretty much it for this video. Like I said, the main things to think about are like the cool sort of like melodic stuff, like trying to think outside of the box, then the evolving bass lines, and then like sort of mixing Foley sounds and like more sort of clean electronic sounds for the drums. So that's gonna be it for this tutorial. Let me know what you thought of the intro in the beginning. I'm trying to do a little bit more complex videos. Like I want to do some more interesting stuff and not just show you guys me in front of my computer in my studio because yeah, I have a life outside of here. But yeah, so thank you again, everybody. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And make sure to check out my social media, which is on the screen right now. Thanks again, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.